Okay, so I just wanted to show the lat long thing because I thought it was really sort of an interesting thing to add to the fact that JPEGs have this in them, a lot of them do, is really interesting in and of itself, but for us to be able to use that data is really cool, and it's actually surprisingly easy. So what we did is we searched for, we went to GoDoc and searched for EXIF, and there's a bunch of things here. And let's see which one I ended up using here. This Go EXIF. EXIF is a format, and it's part of the JPEG that has this extra data. And it shows you things like the camera model and other stuff. One of the things that it shows you is a lat long, a geolocation. And so they have an example in here, which is what was used. And it's really easy, simple example. You open a file, you call the code, which may not succeed if it doesn't have the EXIF in it. But if it does, then you get this X thing, which has a bunch of properties. And in particular, it has this. Okay? And so, if we look at the code, the basic idea is that I open the file, and if this were the real photo blog, you'd open the photo that you've got, like you guys were doing. Then you decode it, and you get the lat long, and then I just pass it to my model. And then inside of here, I use the embed, but you could use the static one. Either way would work. But you plop in the lat long and a key, or in the static one, I don't think you have to have a key. And it would embed the photo inside of it, right? So if I go to localhost 9000 and I run the server, I think it's 8080 actually. Right? That's where I took a picture the other day and it got the map for it. So that's part of the sort of creepy factor of, oh, everywhere I take a picture of my phone, it's tracking my location. But we, as web developers, that means if we have users who upload photos and those photos have EXIF, we can use that information to plot things on maps, which is like a really cool capability. And just to note that in this world, it's very easy to plug these things in together, right? Like, I know that Google Maps has the ability to show a map of a latitude longitude, so I just have to get a latitude longitude. I know the JPEGs have latitude longitude in them. I can plug those together, and you're looking at 10 lines of code maybe to do that, right? And so it's really easy to do a lot of those kinds of things. So it's very powerful, and that's part of the reason why web development's become such a dominant field, is that it makes things like this so easy.
Hey, look, don't mean to get totally off topic, but this is good for all the way around the world.
Yes.
How does a whole airliner with an airline full of people disappear who most of them have phones?
Because they turned them all off.
Off the grid.
300 people really?
Well, no, it's
300 people, all of them shut their phone down.
No, probably not. So first of all, if you're in the air, you don't have data access usually, because you're like too far from a cell phone tower. And so your data is not going to work. And so, although the GPS on the phone might be working, that information was never communicated out of the phone. And so that's why it never, you see what I'm saying?
Right.
Like they never had internet access, and so they could never send it out. It's an interesting question though, if you were on a plane that did have internet access, it seems unlikely that you could just disappear, right?
Right.
Because people would be using their laptops and stuff. But,
the thrust of my question is the communication,
yeah, it is something to wrap your head around that the power of the phone has just sort of changed the world we live in such a way that like things like that are almost to the point where you know where everybody is at all times, and that's kind of like a weird. We didn't know that before, and now we do, right? But anyway, so yeah, the next time you upload an image to Instagram or whatever, just keep in mind they're tracking everything you do. So maybe you'll think twice about that.
Not to mention Google location services.
Yeah.
Yes, Google does it, everybody does it. And so, okay, so that's how we could add EXIF. I put a few more up there. I put up there, what if you wanted to upload, say, a zip file? There were some other things I had up there. Did anybody do any of those other ones? I don't think so. Okay. So just to give you, I mean, I'm not going to do it, but just to give you some ideas of how you would go about it. There is a zip library built into the, so you don't even have to install this. Archive zip comes with it. And it can open a zip file. So you hand it a file, And in this case, it has to be enclosed with it'll open it as a zip file, and then you can loop through every file inside of it.
Nice.
And so we could get each of the images out of our zip file and then save them just like we did before. So actually, this would be not too much code to do. For thumbnails, that's a little more complicated to generate a thumbnail, right? Because like Bob had big photos, and that's not unusual. Most people have big photos, and so that initial page, you're like looking at them. You probably don't want to include the big photo. You want to include a smaller version that fits on the page, right? Because each of those big photos might be several megs. They're pretty large. And if you're a web server, you're paying the cost for the bandwidth. It costs you money to send data to other people. And so if you can minimize that data, you're way better off. And so most websites, if they have images like photos, they're going to use thumbnails. They're going to make smaller versions of the photos and place them on there. And so in the standard libs, there is image capabilities in here somewhere. Here we go, image. And you can load a JPEG, and you could resize it this way. I think the built-in image in Go is kind of slow because it doesn't have a very efficient implementation. But there are libraries out there that could do it probably better. But I'm just saying you could implement image resizing with Go using these guys. So that would be the first place to look is the image library. So basically load as JPEG, resize it, save a new one, and you'd save thumbnails for all of the images in your code. So that would be pretty straightforward. And like Bob was saying, we could have also added additional features as far as buttons on it, like deletion and that kind of stuff. I think, does everybody understand the basic approach there, what that would look like? The idea being that I have my list of images, and I would check for the session. If I had the session logged in, then I would add the button. That button would link to some URL that would be like /image/delete, and then you put question mark and the name of the image or an ID of the image. Okay. Then you get to that page, and you would actually do the deletion if they're logged in. Okay, that's the idea. The general approach how we do buttons. But we'll see more examples of that kind of stuff in the future.
Package image was the one for resizing.
Yeah, I think it can. If it can't, there's going to be a third-party one that can.
All right.
But it can definitely load JPEGs. It's just I don't know if it can do all the other stuff it needs to do. So, any more questions about this stuff? Right. Okay. So now what I want to show you is something completely different.